Hello to our listeners, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Weekly Defense Podcast, brought to you in partnership with our sponsor Raytheon Intelligence and Space. I'm your host, Alex Valenti, and with me today in this virtual newsroom, we also have news editor Ben Vogel, senior land reporter Tim Fish, and for a break from our usual crew, we also have with us today military training editor Trevor Nash. Hi, guys.
Hi there, Alex.
Hi, Alex.
Good evening.
Good to have you, Trevor. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you very much. Looking forward to my first major podcast for Shephard.
And looking forward to you sharing your news.
Yeah, excellent.
We have quite a bit to unfold this week from all domains, including training, as the recent Training and Simulation Industry Symposium took place in Orlando. And from the land side, we will touch on South American procurement, looking at Argentina specifically, and then we will look at the Pacific region with Australia. In the second part of the show, we speak to UK company Mars Group about their work in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to support, from a defense perspective, the country's Vision 2030. And our sponsor provides this week's Industry Voice segment. But as usual, before we start our conversation, let's move on to the headlines from this week. And we start in the Black Sea, where the UK Type 45 destroyer HMS Defender was in the news twice this week. Firstly, it hosted representatives of the UK and Ukrainian MODs and Babcock, who signed a comprehensive agreement covering new ships, training, and the regeneration of naval facilities. 2 days later, on 23rd of June, HMS Defender was sailing close to the coast of Russian-annexed Crimea when the Russian MOD claimed to have fired warning shots. The UK MOD disputed this account, stating that the Russians were conducting a gunnery exercise while HMS Defender was merely conducting, quote, innocent passage through Ukrainian territorial waters. Moving on to France next, where French company Novadem will use next week's SOFIN Special Forces show to present the integration of its NX-70 micro-drone with Pilar gunshot warning and localization technology from Metravib Defense. Other versions of Pilar are already provided aboard helicopters and military vehicles, but its installation on NX-70 would be the first time the technology is incorporated with a UAV. Over in the US, the DoD on 21st June announced that 3 unique weapon capabilities will be developed for and installed on F-35A and F-35B aircraft by Lockheed Martin for the UK and Italy. The DoD gave no further information about which weapons are covered by the latest modification, but its description of unique weapons capabilities could include reference to MBDA Spur-3 missile. The UK picked this missile in January 2021 to arm its F-35B aircraft aboard the Queen Elizabeth-class aircraft carriers. And finally, Honeywell is providing its Tallinn inertial land navigation technology to the Australian Defence Forces. The Tallinn technology will enhance the National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile System. It will provide precise and accurate positioning, pointing, and targeting, even where GPS satellite guidance is not available. And this concludes the headlines for this week. Now let's start unpacking some of the stories we have in focus. And Trevor, if that's okay, I'll start with you as our honored guest for today. And so let's talk about this Training and Simulation Symposium, which took place in Florida last week, and which you followed from the UK, as we've all been doing for the past year, following from remote locations. So to start off, could you tell us about this Training and Simulation Symposium? What is it about?
Well, Alex, it happens every year, and it takes place in Orlando. This year, the event was virtual and live, so you have the option of, staying in the office or going and visiting the show in Orlando. And basically, the show is designed to allow the US Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps to brief industry on upcoming requirements, both domestic requirements and foreign military sales. Plus, which is very interesting, they also talk about their training strategy for the future. So it's a really great environment for industry to involve themselves with the military and get a good handle in a very open environment. In fact, it was very clear that the Department of Defense wants to increase this liaison with industry. One of the speakers, a guy called Mike Merritt, who's the acquisition director for the Naval Air Warfare Center Training Systems Division, said, our future relationship must be based on open and honest communication, and that's the key. And I think he's right. And that show gives a platform for that to happen.
Okay, so hopefully it does happen after the show ends. So could you tell us a bit then about the future of the training programs?
Training is one of those things. It always seems to be going through a reinvention. We'll come on to that in a minute, Alex. But in terms of the four main services, there's a lot going on at the moment. In the US Army, for instance, their program, the Synthetic Training Environment Program, is the cornerstone of their future training. The US Army has just released the latest version of its field manual on training, version 7.0, which takes into account STE and the way that the US Army is going to train in the future. So that's the cornerstone. It's looking very much now at replacing its older laser-based tactical engagement systems, the MILES system. And of course, the Army, like the other services, is very heavily into providing its equipment to overseas countries through FMS. From the Navy's perspective, it's absolutely staggering. People tend to forget that the US naval aviation element is just massive, and their training program over the next year is worth about $1.9 billion.
Wow.
So, we're talking big numbers here. Lots of stuff going on the naval side, enhancements basically to current simulators for the P8, FA-18, MH-60 and E-2D. Marine Corps, the Marine Corps seemed to be left behind a little bit in the United States. The commandant was reported as talking about their range systems that they've got. And he said that the range systems are antiquated and the force lacks the necessary modern simulators to sustain training standards and readiness. So that's the other services were banging on about how good they were, how they're using cutting edge simulators. The Marine Corps were, telling it like it is, which I find very, very interesting.
Well, hopefully also that helps, as you said at the beginning, that helps creating a bit more of a synergy between the industry and the Marines after, going out publicly about this.
Yeah, I think you're right, and that synergy, that reflects very badly on a lot of countries in the world. In the UK, for example, future programs, training programs, tend to be very secretive, and the MOD tend to not want to share too much information. But the Americans are very much on the other side of the coin. They're very open about it. I just want to say one word. The US Air Force, obviously quite big. Their main simulator program at the moment is called SCARS, Simulator Common Architecture Requirements and Standards. That's progressing well. And what was interesting, in their sort of future platform upgrades, they were talking about upgrading the T-38C, their advanced jet trainer. So this is very important because some sources are reporting at the moment that the T-7A program, the advanced jet trainer replacement for the T-38, is running late due to shortages of components. And the fact that they're extending the life of the T-38C simulators is very good, and that's hopefully going to fill that gap, that advanced jet trainer gap.
Okay, that sounds good. And so that's mostly for the US side. What about, as you mentioned at the beginning, the international side of training?
Oh, well, if you look at the Army, they are, the FMS programs are amazing. And it varies from very small programs, such as Bohemia Interactive Simulations, helping Nigeria use VBS, a gaming software, valued at 100,000, all the way up to Georgia, which is by far the biggest recipient. And Georgia is getting a number of systems, including range system, live fire range system, and a combat training center. So it's amazing. And the countries covered, include Serbia, Kosovo, Kazakhstan, very much in line with the United States, NATO's political aims of bringing these countries on board and providing peace stabilization.
Just one question, Trevor. I was just wondering, do you think then that where these countries maybe can't afford to buy high-end combat systems, land, sea or air, they're actually able to procure at a lower level, but just as equally as important training systems, and that's kind of a way in to develop that kind of defence industrial relationship with some other countries?
Yeah, I think you're right, Tim. One of the things about training, it's often forgotten. You can have the best equipment in the world. If you don't know how to use it operationally, it becomes wasted. So training really is a force multiplier. And also, by having especially virtual training systems, they help to develop your strategy, your future requirement base. So it's not just training by having these simulators; it's also expanding into other areas.
Hi, Trevor.
Hello, Ben.
I was just wondering, given the effects of COVID on the simulation and training industry over the past, well, it's coming up to 18 months, isn't it? 15 months at least. Are you seeing light at the end of the tunnel based on the various discussions at the symposium?
Yeah, I think industry is relatively positive. The only sort of spanner in the works there, Ben, is this problem with the T7 in America, that program being delayed, because that was advancing incredibly quickly. It was a computer designed concept, which they flew the first 2 aircraft incredibly quickly after contract award. Although they haven't said that some of those delays are due to COVID, I think, in all honesty, that they have been. And it's the fact that, people can't travel around, workers can't come into factories to make subcomponents. And so I think that's been one of the factors in the knock-on effect on that program.
Thanks, Trevor. I think we're not done seeing the effects, the aftermath of the COVID, whenever we can actually call it an aftermath. So there'll be plenty more to discuss on this. And I'm sure there would have been plenty more to discuss on this symposium. But unfortunately, no, it'll be a very interesting next article. But we do need to move on. So moving on to you, Ben. And we're staying on the American side of things, talking about Argentina and their armored personnel carrier program. So what's going on there?
Okay, well, at the moment, just to set the scene, the Argentinian army, or is it Argentine army? I never get it right. I can't remember. But the army in Argentina operates a fleet of about 350 quite elderly M113 tracked armoured personnel carriers. But it's been looking for some time, for at least 6 or 7 years, for heavy wheeled vehicles, modern heavy wheeled vehicles to take the place of the M113. And Shephard Defence Insight describes a requirement for about 200 of them in 8x8 configuration. So our freelancer, Wilder Alejandro Sanchez, describes 3 contenders for this requirement: the Guarani, which is made in Brazil, the Striker, M1126, and the VN1 snow leopard vehicle from Chinese manufacturer Norinco. But there have been budgetary constraints, political changes as well. There was a general election in Argentina a couple of years ago. And they've basically precluded procurement of this capability. And of course, I mean, as we've just discussed with Trevor, COVID as well is another factor that's kind of pulling on government attention and funding.
Yeah, of course. Wait, so you mentioned how many? 200 vehicles?
200, that's right.
Yeah, sorry, that's a lot. What's the requirement? Why so many, and why these ones?
Well, I think as mentioned, there's a large fleet of M113 tracked APCs that have been in service for a long time. Some of them have been upgraded to the M113A2 configuration. However, overall, there's a need to modernise the Argentine Army fleet. Hence this requirement. But of course, it's proven to be somewhat complicated to actually go forward from planning to execution. There is a recent update is that there has been an example of the Guarani that's made in Brazil by Iveco that's been sent to Argentina for evaluation. And actually, Alejandro quotes in his story that the Argentine defense minister has actually explicitly said that this is a geopolitically strategic platform. So there's certainly some political will to buy Guarani. And also there's another factor is that the motor for the vehicle is made in Argentina as well. So there's a powerful economic case for choosing that.
So Ben, like with the story, it says that it makes it sound like the 6x6 Guarani from Brazil is a contender in this competition. But the other contenders you mentioned are both 8x8 vehicles, and the Army requirement is for an 8x8 vehicle to replace the M113s. So do you think that the entire reasoning behind the 6x6 testing in Argentina is just for political reasons? And realistically, there's no, from an Army point of view, in capability point of view, there's no reason you'd buy a 6x6 vehicle when you're looking for an 8x8 vehicle. It just sounds ridiculous, unless the political direction comes and tells otherwise. So do you think that is kind of the factor here that you have to look out for?
Partly, yeah. Politics and economics definitely playing a big role here because, as I said, the motor for the Guarani is made in Argentina, so there must be some perhaps economic lobbying in favour of that platform. However, there's also some thinking, some talk of an 8x8 version of Guarani possibly being made in future to meet requirements such as the Argentina 8x8. When that would happen, of course, is anyone's guess at the moment.
They have been talking about that for some years in Brazil, but it's never come to fruition. I think even as far back as the LAD conference in 2013 and 2015, they were mentioning it then, but it doesn't seem to have moved at all.
Yes, a lot of heat, but very little light in terms of that particular variant. So the outlook is a little bit uncertain because the negotiations are still underway with these three contenders, and actually wheeled armoured personnel carriers, they don't even feature in the Argentina Ministry of Defence's defence procurement plan for 2021 to 2023. It mentions a lot of other platforms. It doesn't actually explicitly mention this wheeled APC requirement. So, a few encouraging noises, but a firm procurement date, who knows?
Well, maybe they're waiting for the geopolitically strategic 8x8 version of the Iveco one.
You may well be right.
So thanks very much, Ben, for this insight. I know we'll all be waiting to see what happens, but apparently we shouldn't be holding our breath anytime soon. So moving on to Down Under with Tim Fish and a story about the... Okay, so I'm going to say Hawkei, but this is a land vehicle, and I'm going to keep saying that it sounds an awful lot like the surveillance air plane also that Thales produces. But Tim, can you tell us more about the Hawkei land version?
Yeah, sure. The Hawkei 4x4 protected mobility vehicle is being procured by the Australian Army. Every time I say Hawkei, I keep thinking of one of the surgeons from the characters from MASH, the American TV series as well. So that's another association that I can't get out of my head either. But there was a Australian Senate Budget Estimates Committee hearing at the beginning of this month in June, which sounds pretty boring, but actually it's quite a mine of valuable information about current procurement programs. And they were talking about Hawkei, and it was disclosed that the vehicles had more problems. The vehicles had problems in the past with all kind of reliability issues, but some more problems have emerged at the end of last year when there were issues with the anti-lock braking system. This meant that the initial operating capability was delayed, and the issue with the ABS was that it meant that the vehicle went off performing off-road, going up hills on steep gradients. It couldn't really stop properly because the anti-lock braking system would think that the vehicle was in a skid. So this was potentially quite dangerous. So they had to stop training. IOC was delayed, and this is after that full rate production has actually been approved already before this happened. So you've got quite a bit of a mess of a program there. So basically, they were discussing the solutions to this, and it's come out that Thales, the main prime contractor, and Wabco ZF from Germany, the brakes manufacturer, are coming up with a software patch to kind of fix the vehicles. But that's not going to be sorted out until June next year when they kind of do a verification and validation of that system. So Thales has already delivered 138 low-rate production vehicles, and it's not clear if that full-rate production that's been approved is going to move on and proceed with that at this stage.
So June next year, that's a long way away. So what's happening with training? Has it resumed or is it stopped? Are they waiting for this software update? What's going on there?
Yeah, the software patch hasn't been implemented yet. It's been tested and they're going to start implementing it. But the vehicles are going to be used, but they're going to have limitations where when they're operating off-road or on dirt tracks, they can't go any higher than 40 kilometers an hour, which sounds kind of a bit of a weird thing to have. You can have initial operating capability of these vehicles, but then they've got limitations. And then the head of Land Systems Division at the Department of Defence's Capability and Sustainment Group, Major General Andrew Bottrell, actually said that this doesn't affect capability, which I found kind of bizarre, that you have a vehicle that can't move off-road at any particular high speeds, but that the overall capability is fine. There's no impact at all. It doesn't prevent the vehicle from meeting those capability requirements. So I find that kind of strange, but it would be interesting to see what happens next with that program, whether or not they'll proceed with the full weight production stage. They've got 1,000 vehicles on order, so they're supposed to be producing about 50 a month from around now onwards. So it remains to be seen whether that's going to progress or if there'll be more delays.
It's interesting, Tim, isn't it? Because if you look, we're having problems in the UK with Ajax. At this TSIS conference in Orlando, the head of the training management office for the F-35 said that they're going to put more training into the simulator because the actual aeroplane is so expensive to operate per hour, and there are massive issues with getting spares for its readiness. So it just seems that throughout the world, people that procure this very expensive kit are having massive problems.
Yeah, they don't seem to be doing the right sort of following procedures in the right way to kind of de-risk projects earlier on, and when issues come up, there seems to be and it's been known for the UK MOD in particular anyway, that there's been like a culture of optimism where everything's going to be fine, let's just keep going and brush over and brush things under the carpet, which is kind of corrosive really, because it's not conducive to getting capabilities into service on time.
When initial operational capability is declared for a vehicle, there's no turning back from that, is there? Once you've declared it, that's it. You move on to the next stage and you can't retrace your steps. Is that a fair summary?
I think what a lot of the problems seem to be, and this is like what Trevor is saying with Ajax and other programs, is there seems to be kind of a hard and fast schedule with all these different stages: initial operation capability, this stage testing, and then full operation. And programs have to meet these schedules, and they don't want to delay them, they don't want to move them. So you end up with a kind of bizarre situation where sometimes you pass through these milestones, and Warrior was an example of this as well, where it's passed its critical design review, it's passed its preliminary design review, all these different stages designed to kind of make programs sound really obtuse and boring, but the vehicles aren't actually ready, but they're making excuses to get through these milestones just to make it look like the program's on schedule. And then all of a sudden it comes to the hard crunch at some point where they really can't deliver and it all blows up in their face, and you just like, they keep doing it, and you just think, don't declare operational capability if the vehicle isn't operational in an initial way, right? So I don't know if there's a way around it. I think all they can do is just pause the program where it's at, accept the delays, accept the cost increases, fix it, and then move on, rather than keep driving forwards ahead blindly like they have been.
Yeah, I think that sounds fair. And I know that we're going to run out of time soon, but I was hoping that we'd have a few minutes to discuss, to stay in Australia and discuss. I mean, you mentioned before Australian Senate Estimates Committees. They're not boring. I think you're right. There's always something going on. And we haven't talked much about the naval domain. So perhaps you have some interesting updates about what's going on in Australia on the naval platform side of procurement and programs?
Yeah, I mean, there was loads of good stuff from those meetings. It took a long time to sort of go through all the transcripts and everything, but there was stuff on the Hunter class frigate program. The issue with that is there might be some sort of delay, because they're supposed to begin construction at the end of 2022, but there's kind of hinting that they need to mature the design first, because they're putting a lot of Australian equipment on what is the Type 26 frigate design from the UK. So they have to adapt it. So they're going to advise in the next couple of months whether or not they can actually stick to that beginning of that construction date. And there's also a question about the weight margin on the Hunter class as well. The ship, when it's delivered empty, with all its equipment, but without fuel, ammunition, crew, that kind of thing, there's only a weight margin of 3.3% or 270 tons, which you can then add to that ship through its service life. If there's extra equipment that needs to go on. So there were a lot of questions about, why is this weight margin so slim? If you have future systems, if the ships could last 20, 30 years, you potentially want to put on lasers or other kinds of things which have heavy batteries and all kinds of power management systems. That's just one example. Or if you want to have different missile systems or heavier, bigger radar or whatever, that's going to increase the weight of the ship. And especially if it's a radar, it goes up on top of the mast, it's going to cause even more problems. So it seemed to sort of dance around the issue a bit and say, well, compared to like the Anzac frigates, they had a bigger weight margin, but they were fitted for, but not with equipment. So they had more of a weight margin because they were going to have equipment added on later. Whereas the Hunter class will have all the equipment fit on very good systems and everything on early, straight away from day one. So you don't need the extra weight allowances. And then they sort of said, well, if you do have to add more stuff on later, you'll have to take other things off. So it begs the question of what you take off then. Otherwise, you can't add, so there's a few questions around that, which I thought were quite interesting. And then it came out that 6 of the 8 Anzac frigates themselves have been in maintenance in 2021. So they've only got 2 available. There have been defects in the LHDs, the amphibious ships, who are going through major dockings, having some of their azimuth pods replaced. HMS Sirius has had defects, and HMS Chills has had its chilled water plant replaced. There are lots of little issues that are cropping up with some of these ships that mean they're not available. And apparently overall there's been a reduction in availability of a lot of major surface combatants of about 20%. That includes frigates, destroyers and Collins-class submarines as well. So that's pretty damaging. It's not just because of maintenance. The Chief of Navy said that his workforce was a limitation because he hasn't got enough sailors, mainly for the Anzac frigates. So that's a problem that can't be fixed straight away. So I think they are putting remediation efforts in, but there's going to be a lot of problems down the track if you're not going to have crew to man all your vessels.
Yeah, that doesn't sound very good. I'm not sorry I asked, but I'm sorry for Australian armed forces because it's not going very well at the moment. But let's hope, that things will pick up soon. So unfortunately, that's it for today. I know there was so much more that we could have discussed with all these stories, but thank you very much for listening today. And for our listeners, if you want to find out more about Shephard's defense news coverage, previous episodes of the podcast, video content, and more, please visit our website, shepherdmedia.com/news. Coming up after the break is multimedia journalist Noemi Di Stefano in conversation with Mars Group about the company expansion in Saudi Arabia and the offer of counter-UAS solutions to the kingdom. Stay with us.
From your home office to out at sea to on mission. Shephard News is used by more than 4 million government, military and industry professionals across the globe. So what are you waiting for? Start your 14-day free trial to premium news and join ranks with those in the know. Head to shepherdmedia.com/subscribe today.
Welcome back to our listeners for this second part of the show with me, Noemi Di Stefano, and I'm also joined by a special guest. He's Andrew Forbes, the Managing Director of UK company Mars Group. Mr. Forbes, good afternoon and welcome to the Weekly Defence Podcast.
Thank you very much, Noemi. I'm looking forward to talking to you and speaking about Mars in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
I'm looking forward to the conversation as well. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today. And as you said, we're going to talk about the work that Mars is doing in Saudi Arabia, which is a country located at the heart of a global supply chain, a kingdom that for long has been considered one of the world's leading players and top spenders in the defense sector. And as I'm sure many listeners would know, the kingdom is now working on ways to rethink its economy, to diversify it as part of its vision 2030 framework. This is unlocking new opportunities for firms of all sizes to contribute and support the Vision 2030. And as a company which focuses on developing land and marine-based solutions, Mars is embracing the potential offered by the Saudi market, and it has also opened headquarters in the capital, Riyadh. Mr. Forbes, perhaps you could expand a bit more on why and how Saudi Arabia represents an attractive market for Mars Group.
Okay, Noemi. Obviously, as you say, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is looking at diversifying to meet its the vision of 2030. Now, on our side, we are a very heavy technology-based company, and we see the Kingdom as a key player in technology and developing technology. We're trying to, as part of our vision in the Kingdom, is to use local suppliers, but also to use local people and building up our Saudi workforce. We already have met our targets for Saudiization for our workforce, and what we want to do is go above and beyond that, looking at young graduates, bringing them in, so bringing the tech from the universities and the technical institutes to work with our team, and then develop those personnel so that they can move in and replace our expatriate workforce in the future. But as you say, it's the centre of some of the supply chain. There are a lot of large infrastructure requirements in Saudi Arabia, and we also are looking at how we can help protect those. Now, Mars has actually been in the Kingdom for over 10 years, providing some small-scale projects. We've now expanded and opened up our regional office, and we chose Riyadh. And there's a big drive for regional offices to be based in Riyadh, and we took that opportunity straight away because the majority of our projects are in the Kingdom anyway. So we wanted to open an office here and use the workforce and the capabilities in Kingdom to expand our portfolio.
Okay, thank you for that answer, Mr. Forbes. I just wanted to, before we look at closely at the work that Mars is doing in the Kingdom, I just wanted to ask you probably a cheeky question. So the other day I was taking a look at, while I was working on another story, at the World Military Spending Report published by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI. And the report states that Saudi Arabia invested 61.69, if I'm not mistaken, billion in defense in 2019. And then the investment took a plunge in 2020, going down to 57.5 billion. So it's around a 10% fall in 1 year. If this continues to happen in the coming years, do you think there is a risk for company like Mars?
Well, there's always a risk for companies like Mars, but obviously we offer a very niche market in the counter-drone area. So I think we're okay at the moment on that side because there is a clear and present threat to the Kingdom and other GCC countries from counter-UAS systems. So I'm not concerned in there, but we've got to obviously offer the best of breed, the best technology and capabilities that the customer want to buy. And that's where we aim for, offering that quality, offering that transfer of knowledge to our Saudi partners and working with the industries in the Kingdom, especially working with both GAMI and SAMI to meet their requirements for localization and develop things within the Kingdom. Because as you said earlier on about 2030, the Saudi government want to look at how they can build their own defence industry within Kingdom so they don't have to move outside the borders, and that's what we want to help enable as well.
And if we focus on defense and security capabilities, can you maybe talk a little bit more in detail about what Mars is offering in terms of capability, what is providing, what is developing, to offer a solution to the numerous drone strikes and missile attacks on Saudi's oil facilities?
As some of your listeners might know, one of our capabilities is NIDAR. And NIDAR is a C4I capability, and we like to say it's agnostic. So that means you can connect any sensor or effector into our system to provide a protective bubble around a facility or a location that will enable you to detect, identify, verify, and then make the decision how you want to deal with that threat. So the NIDAR system itself has been developed by Mars. So we have then the capability, and this is why we say it's agnostic, for the customer to choose what system they want to connect to our system. We do not go in, we do not make radars or cameras or sonars. So we want the customer to come to us. So if they already have a capability, they may want to connect that capability, and we try and facilitate that. That enables the cost to be kept down, but we also push for best of breed, the best technology, so there is a good life cycle, a long-term capability for the customer then to use on those systems.
Okay, so NIDAR is flexible and customizable. Is it interoperable with other systems, right?
Correct. And the thing we try and do is that we have the ability to customize, as you say. If the customer has something specific that they need within the system, we can work on the system to give them exactly what they want. So we could have two customers in different parts of the kingdom with different requirements, and we try and satisfy their requirements, because all customers work in a different way. Even in the defence industry, one customer might be looking at one type of threat and another customer a different type of threat. So we try to customise to the customer's requirement.
And you mentioned earlier that there will be some technology transfer and industrial workshare. I don't know how much you can disclose about this, but is Mars working with local Saudi industry, for example, the Saudi Arabian military industries? And if so there will be technology transfer and industrial workshare with them?
That is our plan, and we're in the very immature phases of that at the moment. I'm in discussion, as are the other executives within the Mars Group, to speak to Saudi industry to look at how we can best enable that and what is the best way forward for both the Saudi industries and Mars as a company.
And your most recent press release highlights that you're working with multiple national agencies. Is it possible for you to disclose any details, maybe not about the agencies, but about a broad picture of what is the work that you're doing and co-developing with any of these companies?
It's difficult to say without saying who we're working with, Noemi, but the key thing for us there is that obviously we're using our product and we're using those capabilities to provide a protective bubble on those locations that our customers want to protect. And our customer will then say to us, this is our threat. How can you use NIDAR and sensors to provide a credible sort of warning capability for us, and then an ability to counter that threat? So that's what we try and develop with the customer at the moment, but also with other organisations, because we want to build the capability to give them a training platform. So we deliver our own training on the NIDAR system, but also work with our suppliers to provide bespoke training on their systems, and therefore deliver to the customer exactly what the system can do. But as you can imagine, with something as new and high tech as NIDAR, the customer, after using it, will suddenly discover, I can use it for this. I never thought about this before, potentially. How can you help us develop this capability further? So we're continually looking at the system, continually learning, using artificial intelligence, machine learning to say, how can we give a better product to the customer? Because, as you know, the threat changes, and as the sort of threat agents see us develop our capability, they try and change their capability to counter that.
Yeah, I was going to ask what role AI and us played and plays in the evolution of your system.
As you can imagine, with a changing sort of threat and also a changing use of different systems to attack, you want to build up a database using the artificial intelligence to make the operator more competent in how he does business. I use the scenario sometimes that you don't want to be looking at a screen all day looking for a drone threat coming that may only come once in your lifetime. So you want to enable the system to take away some of those mandrolic tasks, as I would call them, and give the operator the capability that the system is looking at the threat. And then the operator becomes involved when the threat or a threat comes in to identify what that threat is, because it may not be a true threat on that side, but it takes some of those capabilities. So we build up a database of information about the threat, and it's looking continually, trying to get that information and us looking at the information and getting other feeds to update our systems on that side.
Okay, and you mentioned earlier that as customers started testing and using your systems, they can realize that they could use they could integrate somewhere where they didn't think before. Has there been any new discovery where you can use the NIDR systems and how you can use from any of your customers?
Not necessarily, but we're coming up with new ideas. The customers come up, and the way that they operate sometimes changes between customers on that side. So they'll say, we want to use the system this way. We want threat alarms this way. We want this in Arabic, but this in English. How can you adapt it? How can you give us a visual display and a audible a noise when there's a threat, or that we've extinguished the threat? So it's working with them to give that sort of functionality. I look at NIDAR as almost, and I don't want to use the term gaming, but it gives you that capability. And because of the way that the NIDAR screen is, it's very intuitive for the customer to understand how to use it. The training burden on it is quite low because we can train the customer, and the customer will come to us and say, I did this, and we go, oh, right, okay, let's see how we can develop that so it is better for you. But we then look at that and say, there's other customers that may want to use some of the functionality of NIDA, but a smaller amount, just for detecting the threat and identifying it, not necessarily wanting to do anything else. So they want to give a warning that something's going to happen on that side.
Okay. So NIDR offers air base and naval protection, but is your work in the kingdom only focused on providing defense and security on the ground, or is there also work that is being done in some of the maritime hotspots like the Gulf of Oman or Strait of Hormuz?
At the moment, no, but as you most probably are well aware, our background is mainly in the maritime sort of area on that side. So it's something that we offer as a capability, looking under the water on that side. And, some of the things I look at is how could we develop that to give a sort of a window of coverage, as you say, down on the maritime sort of areas, Straits of Hormuz or anything like that. So what are ways that we could work with other agencies? Could our communications or our eyes be through a satellite as opposed to a fixed camera? How can you offer that protection and that warning that the threat is coming from somewhere else? It could be from a sort of maritime launched platform as opposed to a land launched platform. So how can we offer those sort of protections on that capability? So we have a team in Monaco who are continually working at looking at these sort of things and saying, what is the next threat on that side?
And emerging UAS threats may be able to defeat traditional jamming technologies. Does the NIDR system offer a solution to this problem?
For me, it's yes, but as you can imagine, the threat changes regularly. If you counter a threat, someone else will look at how they can then change the threat on that side. So this goes back to me with the sort of artificial intelligence, the Internet of Military Things that you hear that so often, and we look at. So we're looking at that capability. But for me, it's I'm a big fan of Star Trek, and as Scotty would say, you can change the laws of physics. So these drones, they need a sort of RF or a GPS capability, and that's the sort of things that you look at.
So it's a capability that will continue to evolve as the threats evolve.
Correct.
And apart from Nether, is there any other solution that Mars provides in the kingdom or is looking at?
As you're most probably aware, we have things like man overboard capability. Now, we're not necessarily looking for that in the kingdom, but it is an opportunity that we look at as it becomes a sort of requirement for ships on that side. So this would be a market we'd look at. We also have another capability called Radiguard, and that is a surveillance type capability that we're looking at in Kingdom, because we can use you can use it as a sort of border protection or out in isolated areas. You can use the solar power to power the system to work throughout the capabilities, because sometimes in remote areas it's difficult to get power, communications. So we're looking at that as a definite capability here and are pursuing avenues on that as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Forbes, for being with me today here on the Weekly Defence Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me along. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. Thank you.
For over 40 years, Shephard has led the defence and aerospace sector with magazines, equipment handbooks, and cutting-edge news stories. Shephard now champions the best business information and marketing solutions across digital, so your business can have the decisive edge in everything you do. Make your team the competitive advantage. Partner with Shephard today. Get in touch with one of our customer experts to discuss your needs at shepherdmedia.com.
So welcome to this week's Industry Voice segment. This is a part of the show that's sponsored by Raytheon Intelligence and Space. I'm sitting down with two program directors from Raytheon Technologies. We have Melissa Morrison-Ellis, who's the director for the Next Generation Interceptor, and Rob Allseth, who's the director for Missile Warning and Missile Defense Programs. First of all, guys, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you.
So just to kick things off, on May 18th, we saw Space Force launch satellites for the Space-Based Infrared System program. It does kind of raise a few questions. I mean, there's been a lot of changes of direction in this program. It's been quite a long-running effort. But I guess, you know, from both of your perspectives, what do you guys think is needed when it comes to missile warning as we look to next generation technologies and, you know, the kind of emerging threats that we can kind of look out over the next sort of 5-10 years?
So what we're seeing now is a real change in how the Space Force and all of DoD looks at these threats in a much more comprehensive and combined way. So the historical tack on this set of requirements has been to develop two distinct areas: missile warning. Then you had the BMDS suite of sensors, you know, between sea-based radars, ground-based radars, different effectors, a fairly complex system of systems. What you're seeing with the change in threats, so for instance, many of the threats we've seen in historical times were ballistic. Now you're seeing, you know, hypersonics, non-ballistic threats becoming the preponderance of our adversaries', you know, arsenal. So you'll see the Space Force as well as MDA working closer together, looking at combined layered architectures that are no longer sort of staying true to these stovepipes. They become now a completely interwoven set of capabilities. So one of the things we're seeing is space is becoming a much more prominent picture or part of that architecture to give us that complete picture. So in past, SBIRS was the eyes in the sky that initiated the bell ringer, if you will, for those threats. And as we go forward now, we're seeing space being a critical component to basically reducing latency. Latency meaning our ability not only to sense and bell ring that a threat has been engaged, but we understand the trajectory and the dynamics of that threat so that our radars are more effective and our effectors, the missiles that we have in our inventory, have more time. We can actually get a much better vector. So we don't have the magazine capacity, right? The depth of those. One missile can take with a high probability, can take a threat out earlier in its flight. And that's what space brings to the picture, as well as a global capability. So that's a big change in the architecture.
I think just to that, I would just add that, it takes more vision. It takes more precision. Some of the things that Rob talked about, we're looking for technologically advanced sensors, command and control systems. It's a layered system that it takes now to defeat all types of threats, and not just threats of today, but programs that we're working on now. We're being asked to look at threats 30 years in advance of now, from short-range missiles to hypersonic warheads hurtling through space. So no simple feat. And when it comes to that level of missile defense, no nation and no system can stand alone.
I mean, and taking a step back and looking at this piece, I mean, I guess I'd sort of argue that a lot of people don't realise how much of the missile defence mission actually occurs in space. Is that a barrier in terms of, finding funding, things moving into programs of records? Is there an awareness piece that, how, in terms of your roles and working with your customer, in terms of, generating that awareness about the importance of the space and the missile defence mission?
I don't know about Rob, but I feel that our customers, our nation understands the need, the criticality for this need. What we have in the grounds today, the time they don't get any younger, and our ability to need to get ahead of these threats. So I don't think we have a lot of pushback on the criticality of it. The fact that this is a very complex mission that occurs in space, yes, it is. It is costly. Yes, it is more difficult, but I do believe it is welcomed, and the understanding is there that it's a critical time for this need.
Yeah, so the technology, if you go back 30 years, some of the technologies just didn't exist, and so there was quite a bit of inventing new things. An exciting place to be if you're an engineer, but if you're working in acquisition in a program, it can be fairly frightening. I think what the state of technology now has afforded us, giant leaps in capability over what we have, but without a lot of the technological risk that they had to pioneer in the early days. It's just the state of where we are, because space has really come a long ways. And so we're able to harvest a lot of that technology from other programs that we support, even other parts of our business. There's things on the aircraft side that we found ways of utilizing it in space with proper shielding. And we've just learned a lot, right? So our ability to apply this sort of cutting edge technology and where it stands without the commensurate, high risk profile, as well as high cost profile, I think that's a big leap. If you look at these architectures that we've looked at and we've modeled these things, we can see, what do you get by adding 2 or 3 radars, on the ground, and you get a capability improvement, right, against a certain threat scenario. Right, you parameterize those things and you say, okay, yes, it's better. The largest leap in capability that you get in these architectures, though, by an order of magnitude, is when you add a space layer for missile defense, because it buys you so much time and it's global, meaning you've got eyes everywhere all the time. Radars have to wait until something comes over the horizon. They're limited by the geometries and of course geographies. There's a lot of limitations, and even the ships can't move too far forward without being just a giant target themselves. So there's all these limitations from a terrestrial-based perspective. But then when you go to space, it's this giant leap in capability. And again, with the state of technology where it stands in space, we now have really like a wide open door to providing this capability in a fairly short time frame, by the way. We're seeing a lot of very rapid government acquisition timelines that are entirely achievable. And we're seeing a lot of good progress there. I think NGI, the space part of that, at least, we have space qualified components going in that to make sure that it works in the harsh environment. And we're able to harvest a lot of the components from, existing and previous space programs that we can then assuredly deliver a product that works in space, meets the schedule and the cost parameters of our customers. So yeah, there's a lot of big changes on the horizon, and space is going to be part of it. So
that's great. Such a fascinating area, something about space that we could talk about this all day for sure. But for now, Melissa Morrison-Ellis and Rob Olseth, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This episode of the Weekly Defense Podcast was brought to you in partnership with our sponsor Raytheon Intelligence in Space. A big thanks to everyone who took the time of being with us today. And for our listeners, if you enjoyed the show, make sure you like and subscribe, leave a review on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts from. If you wish to know more about the market landscape of the defense sector, please visit shepherdmedia.com/subscribe and redeem your free trial to our premium news, where you can get international coverage of equipment innovation, company news, program updates, and more from our team of expert journalists. Until next week, thanks for listening.